It is pretty natural to think that we're right, for you to think that you're right, that you see things the correct way, and that other people should see things the way that you see them because you know that you see them the right way. I mean, that's what's right there in front of your eyes, and if you use basic logic and common sense, you'll come to the same conclusion that you came to, right? I mean, that's pretty much what we all think. And some of the latest social biology that I think really speaks to that, it starts with a good little narrative. And let me explain the narrative. The narrative would be that if you personally were stranded out in the middle of the wilderness, there's a good chance you would die. Pretty much all of us. Very few of us could be on our own, just stuck out in the wilderness, and we would live. Now, if you were put there with one or two other people, you have a better chance of living. If you were put there with 10 other people, then you have a much better chance of living. If you were put there with 100 people, yeah, some would die probably from some disease or a bear, but you would be able to survive. You would be sustainable. However, the only way that that happens, let's say with 100 people, whatever the number is, 50 people, 100, whatever, the only way that that occurs is if everybody shares a narrative. Now, the narrative is pretty simple in that scenario. It's survival, right? You all have to survive. So by the time you get to say something like a 10,000, right, a small town or a city, unless everybody has the same narrative, there's infighting. And with the more infighting, the more division that occurs. And when those numbers get small, if it turns into war, for example, then that sustainability goes away. There's a minimum number of people that you need for any environment to be able to basically live off the land and to be able to survive the winters and the summers and so forth. And so the social biology argument is that you are programmed to adopt a narrative. It doesn't matter what the narrative is. As long as everybody can agree to a single narrative, then we can all work together. If you can't work together, then you don't survive, you don't thrive. But you have to have a common narrative. So that narrative can be religion, politics, whatever you want to call it, any worldview that explains why things are the way they are. Why should you work hard? Why should you follow the rules? Why should you be a servant to this society? All of those arguments as to why you should do that, that narrative, once you start to add in things like what happens to you when you die, or why does the universe exist, then you start to cross over into traditional religion. But all of that's irrelevant to the point that you have to have a narrative in order to just be able to survive as a human being based on our evolutionary history. So something to think about. If you're criticizing other people's narratives, you're really saying, well, my narrative is best. And the point is that you have to have a narrative. And how do you know your narrative is right? Well, maybe it's right in a lot of things, and maybe it's not right in some others. But that's certainly something to think about.